to, like, let's say I'm writing a JSON parser and I've screwed up somehow. I'm trying to figure out, well, what does the JSON look like that I'm getting? Is it possible to like see that spit out somewhere?
You can see the error as you will have it on parsing the JSON with the JSON parser. So the same way you have a JSON parser failing with saying, hey, I'm looking for this key and the type does not match, or the key's not there, or whatever, you will have that error being thrown at you when you're trying to parse it. Another interesting bit about this library is error handling. Because at this point, you have your values being pure. You have a config map that is pure. You already got rid of all the side effects around where environment variables are being picked up or whatever. You have a way to pick what error strategy you want. The API, the get config value, uses monad throw. So you can say, oh, I want to get the configuration value on the IO monad. If there's a failure with that operation, it's going to throw an exception. Or you want to say, oh, I want to do a maybe of this and do something by default if I needed to. You can just change the return to be a maybe, and it's just going to work. So it's a really convenient library in a sense. I have been explaining a lot. I really want you guys to try it out. So what we're going to do is it's going to go together through this exercise. And the first thing is just compiling it. It's going to take a while. So it's going to do stake build. What? Oh, when you clone, do that. Yes. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, like some of the things that we're going to be using in this workshop are bleeding edge, and I wasn't able to release them before the workshop, but they're going to be released, so hopefully it's going to be okay. So I'm just going to do stack build again, and that's going to build me, well, 4 dependencies, it's not that bad. Just going to wait for that. Yeah.
One is, how would you handle, can you handle dynamic updates to configuration while the application is running? Things from stored in a config stored in a database like Zookeeper or a SQL database.
For that, you would like to implement a resolver, right? You want to make sure that you have a way in your configuration spec to say, hey, this configuration value can come from this database, right? Right now, the way etc. is implemented doesn't allow you to do that. I want to move there though, but it requires, like, the way that will work requires a change on implementation details, on internal implementation details. Like, I want to have different resolvers. Like, that could be one, database one. Another one would be, hey, I want you to get this configuration value from parameter store in AWS. So your program automatically just picks up the encrypted configuration value if the instance that is running into, if the instance that is running the program has access to that, like from the get-go, right? Yeah, like there are different things that can be done to the library. Another thing that people mention is, oh, I really dislike the fact that you're using YAML for this, or JSON. Can I have like actual parse applicative style DSL? It's like, yeah, you could have that, but that will take a while to implement, right? Like it's what I want is people to get interested in this so that people help me.
My
yeah.
question is about migrating configurations.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
You have a whole bunch of configuration files, and now you've changed the spec, and you've added new config, and now you need to migrate all the existing.
So let me see if I understand the question. You want to migrate a system that works with a different configuration strategy?
So we have a spec.
Yeah.
Like this spec.yaml.
Yeah.
That says here's what the configuration options are, but it also points to other more like concrete
File paths.
files, file paths that have specific values.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have 20 different environments that all have their own concrete
Yeah.
values there.
Yeah, you could.
You could have hundreds of thousands of different servers that all have their own configuration files, right?
Yeah.
Now you change the spec, and maybe you've renamed something in the spec, or you've added something new, and you now need to en masse migrate all those files. Maybe add a new value in, or change the name of something.
Yeah, I guess those kinds of challenges is something that a library wouldn't help you.
It could just be outside of that.
Yeah, like that becomes a deployment strategy, right? Like and that becomes, I think, out of the scope, because like the thing is just being able to define a contract. As long as the contract is defined, if you validate, like we can have like validators of contracts saying, hey, I don't have this file here when you say you wanted it there. The thing with that though is this thing just ignores, because you have so many different ways you can get it. It ignores the fact that the file is not there. Say, hey, there's a warning. Like if you see on the implementation I just showed you a second ago. Let's go from here. I'm just gonna kill this and go to app. Oh, main. Oh no. Did you do the git some module update in it? Execute that and it's gonna work. So next release of intro is going to have an intro version per GAC version installed at once, and it's not gonna have installing intro on every package that you build, which is great because I work in a lot of projects and every time I'm building intro and it's like, it freaking sucks. Okay. So just to get back to the questions, okay, yes. When you resolve the files, it returns two things: the file config and file warnings. What is file warnings? File warning says, hey, I look up for this file, but it's not there, right? You can make a decision of log this so that you have a warning saying, hey, I tried to find this and it didn't, so that you know when you look at the logs, it's like, oh yeah, it went through that. So making it strict around, you need to have those configuration files in there. First of all, you have to specify only one, right? There's one canonical thing that can be there. You're going to have all of them in there, right? Because otherwise, what's the purpose of the previous two, right? For those particular situations, you need to work out bash script for that, I would say. I don't know, like, I don't think there's nothing in my program that, or in a library that would know that things are not there and report it in a way that makes sense. I can be wrong though. If there's a proposal that makes sense, for sure. Okay, so this program, if you have tried already, you know it's gonna fail. And why it's gonna fail? Because I made it fail on purpose so that we can go together and fix it. So also on this project, if you are into that, there's a dev folder on make that if I do make dev, it has a GAC ID if you want to run through that. So let's start by just loading this in the REPL and loading it and trying to call main on this and see what happens.
What did you do about the PG config not found?
You have to install a library for Postgres. Depending on your environment, in Ubuntu, I know it's called. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Functional programming is like Haskell -r//.
What command did you just run?
What is running there?
Yeah.
That's intro's REPL on the buffer in Emacs. You can execute. You can do stack REPL, and you will get something similar, but from the REPL.
What's the benefit of doing that in the Impero REPL rather than just doing a shell and stack REPL inside
It depends on the person, but my flow is that I normally load my current buffer, I'm just a key binding away to just load what I need, and I can just change really quickly between the two. Like that's, for me, it's the only benefit that I'm really making advantage of. There's also an integration.
If you're running shell and then stack REPL, you just do :R and it's the same thing.
Yeah, unless you're changing the file. Like I guess you're doing reload on the the topmost project, like the topmost file of your project, your main of your project.
Just load one file.
Exactly. I'm able to say, I want to go to this small module and just load this. I don't care if everything else is not compiling. I don't mind.
You use VOE, right?
No, I'm using Emacs. I'm using Spacemax, which is Emacs with Vim on top of it. If Spacemax, if Emacs didn't have a Vim emulator, I wouldn't be using Emacs. But yeah, Spacemax is the best of the two words for me. So for me. Okay. So let's try and run this main, see what happens. So the first bit it says is, hey, you're trying to run the error that you were asking about the parser failing for some reason. I'm having my parser for the connection string picking up the password key. So if I go to the parse connection string function, I'm looking up at a database entry in here. And when it's trying to parse it, it says, hey, I have a problem on $.password. You're expecting a text, but I have a null value. Why do I have a null value? If I go to the config and go to the spec, well, first of all, I don't have any development.yaml. That's a first, right? And the database password doesn't have a default for a reason, right? So I have two ways to go about that. Or three ways. I could go and add an environment variable for app.db password, or I can go and add a password option to it. So let's just go and do that for now because it's the easiest. So if I do password ABC123, now it says something about the database. Hey, I'm not including the database. If I go to the config again over here, I don't have a database entry in here, so that's not going to work. I need to specify a database with a default in here. So that's what I'm going to do. Going to go here and do database, etc. spec, and I'm going to specify a default that is LC 2018. I can say it's of type string, and that's all I need. If I go and reload my program, like the way this, by the way, the way this configuration spec file is being read is, I'm on compilation time embedding the contents of the file in my binary using this function called embed file. So as soon as I do this, I have the byte string of the file in my binary, so I don't need to look it up anywhere else. That works great because you're embedding your spec with your binary at once. And it's not like, oh, at runtime, I need to pick up my spec file, where should I look for, right? This is an approach. You can have a well-known path for your configuration spec and read that. I like to embed the configuration spec myself. Then I go and parse the configuration spec, and then I resolve all the different configuration entries from the spec and return that. So, okay, going back to the spec.yaml, I have database with the default. I go and load this and do main with a password ABC123. It's telling me, hey, I don't have a database in here, so that's not going to fly. Yeah, let's do that. So I have a Docker file in there that hopefully should help with this, if the demo gods are kind to me today. So I should have, if I go into the Docker compose file and I look at the DV, I have ports being exposed as 5432, 5432, and it's going to create a database that has all those settings. But for some reason it's not working, and that's maybe because I'm not specifying the host on the string, right? So if I go and add also a host in here, host, and I do host equals host, and then I go to the configuration spec file and add a host as well with some defaults. Localhost. See if that works. Yep. I'm going to reload main. Password authentication failed for user LC 2018, and that's because the password I'm providing is not LC 2018. If I do LC 2018, ta-da, things are working, yay. So this is the output I wanted to show you. In here, I'm having all the entries that are on my configuration map, the sources, what their values are, and which one is selected at this point. So for the database, I'm using the default, which is LC 2018. For username is that. For password, it's a sensitive value, so it just hides that away, but it says it's coming from the CLI. The host is coming from the default, and the verbose is coming from the default, and the handle as well. Let's go and modify things. Let's start to, what I want to do is, instead of running in the REPL, I'm going to build it in here. Do I have a make for that? No. Stake build copy bins local bin path out bin. Oh no, bin. There we go. And I want to start defining. If I go back to the spec and I look at, say, app-lock verbose, I want to change that. So the database settings are right now on the spec. Like I just added database and host on the database entry. And I put just some defaults in there.
Have you found a way around the issue that that file does not get reloaded when you reload it in GHCI?
I have never seen that.
So the main point is if I change the specification and I reload,
It should pick up the changes.
right, then
That's weird. I'll get together with you just to.
it worked on your side, I just made the problem here.
Yeah.
Are you getting your Docker base Postgres database?
Yeah, like if I do docker compose up, or does it compose status, I think? No. PS. It tells me that there's a Postgres database up. So if I go and do app logger, so I'm just going to follow the spec. I'm just going to say, I want to change the log to be verbose. App log verbose equals true. Out bin config program password LambdaConf 2018. Aha. So look at the login verbose entry. What does it say? It says, hey, there's two values. There's a default that has a false, and there's an environment variable called app-log verbose whose value is true. And that star in before that means this is the configuration value I'm using. Right? Any questions about that?
Just in the pick on the ordering of the outputs, wouldn't it be better to do it the other way around? Because usually it's always the stuff that's before it is the thing that gets checked first.
Yeah, like I think the order wouldn't matter as long as you have the star, so sure.
Yeah, it's purely for keeping things.
Linear.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as you specified in your file, like first thing to check, the second thing to check,
Yes.
the third thing to check, and then it'll be consistent to display it.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a really convincing point. Yeah, I'll create a ticket for that.
Is there any way, I guess one of the problems that I run into a lot with configuration is that I don't want to, when I run main, you keep getting exceptions there. I want to get rid of that as much as possible. So I mean, we embed the spec with kind of Haskell. Have you done anything to kind of like programmatically parse that, make sure you have options, or something else to kind of...
So the challenge here is, are you concerned about the spec not being correct and having a runtime error, or are you concerned about the configuration value not being present and having a runtime error?
Both.
Okay. So for the configuration value side of things, if the config spec is wrong, you're basically relying on that for your program to work. I think a runtime error there is the fail fast approach, and I highly recommend that. For the for the value not being present and I don't want it to fail, that's pretty easy. I can go and I can say, for example, I'm using parse connection string in this function. As you notice, right now I'm using a monadic IO, monadic throw M in here. And when I'm using the config value here with this bind, what it's saying is I'm going to use whatever monad throw implementation is in there. This point in time is throw an exception in IO. But I can make this be case, etc., get off, and I can get a either a left with the error or a right with the result, or I can get a nothing and adjust. The decision is yours at that point.
Do you have anything that you've done with where you embed the spec with Haskell and then do compile time guarantees against it? Because a lot of this ends up being like you're deferring whether or not you have environment variables and whether or not they're correct until runtime. But I'd like to know when I compile this, I can't even get to like deploying something unless it's going to have all the value.
I haven't gone through that exercise because where I build my software is normally is not where I deploy it.
Yeah, because I think like maybe there's an argument for that the config being dynamically typed to some degree. There's some value in that because, like you said, you have different environments that you want to deploy to, and you don't know until runtime. You don't want to have to compile your config.
Yeah. Like that's a runtime decision most of the time. That should be a runtime decision. Like if there's an environment variable in that runtime.
Hopefully it should blow up like on startup.
If you use the bind operation like that, like I was using before, and you require this value, it's going to throw an exception, and it's not going to initialize, right?
Exactly. And so you should find that out when you start it.
Yeah.
Until the existing process. New one.
But yeah, the decision is yours around how you want to handle the error. And that's the beautiful bit about monad throw. Like, highly recommended if you are dealing with errors of any kind, always use monad throw, independently if it is a maybe, an either, because you make that decision to the caller of the function. You don't force an error managing strategy to your users. You basically say, hey, just pick whatever you think is best for you, right? Yeah, monad throw is like one of the best APIs ever. I love Haskell API. Okay. Why don't you guys go, who at this point has this project compiling and running the same way that I'm doing here? Do you want to spend some time trying to make that work? And if you run into problems, you could either ask me or someone that already solved it and go through that. And let's just do that and take a break. Like we're gonna take a break. Let's spend some time doing that, like just playing with this project and trying to figure it out how to use it and get familiarized with it. Documentation can be found on the Hackage page. You could also see the examples on the repo, which is in Roman, Haskell, etc. Let me just share that. And there, HTTPS, github.com, Roman, Haskell, etc. And Hackage.
I actually get an error that the role LC 2018 doesn't exist.
What doesn't exist?
LC 2018, the role does not exist in the Postgres.
Oh, that's weird because if you run the Docker Compose, it should create that, right?
Yeah, I thought so.
Do you have an existing Postgres that's conflicting Docker Compose?
It may be. I would assume that this would be going from like a Docker, right?
No, like we are exposing the container ports into the host. So if you're running a Postgres instance yourself in the host, it's not going to work.
Roman, I got stuck with the configuration setting. I couldn't
Uh,
That's my biggest miss.
oh, this one.
Yeah, the holes that you added there for the database.
Oh, I see. In the Docker Compose.
Right.
This.
No, not that. If you go back to the spec YAML,
This is the spec YAML.
yeah, you had the holes. You remember it wasn't in the, it's new, right?
Yeah, all the green stuff is new. This file? Okay.
Yeah, that would be enough.
Sure thing. Yep.
I'm probably a bit ahead of time, but I'm trying to write a single stack YAML file.
A single what?
Stack YAML.
Uh,
To make things simpler for all the projects, so that we have everything in single place.
oh, I see. So you wrote a stack file at the top of the. So.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that toxic proxy doesn't work.
Oh, like the thing is that there's different dependencies and different versions of all the projects, and I don't want to have to.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Let me publish this and.
Yeah, no worries.
That's on config. Expected YAML into Vagrant. Go into machines. Castle Black cat config or expected YAML pb copy, and just go to here. It's on the Slack channel.
If you ran as stack command, just a suggestion, maybe if you created a make file for that,
Yes.
that would make run, something simple.
Yes.
We could have it as for history.
Yes. Awesome that you're asking for that. I'm happy you're asking for that.
I could tell you all about make files.
Yeah, make files are like fucking ugly, but they're so useful.
Just like I did a Ruby shop, and then they gave make files, and I love make files.
You're using make instead of rake?
Yeah,
That's
I have my challenges.
So what's the output of this? I think it's called, if I go to package.yaml and look up for the dependencies called config program, and I'll just do config program here. Whoop. And config program bin. If I go and do make build, nothing to be built. If I do out and no, what? Oh, it's because I'm the. If I go to, oh, this is a config program. What the fuck? Make file. Oh no, that should work then. Save. Oh, of course. There you go. Perfect. Gonna push that. So gonna go back here. Dot files bin. Dot file again. Roman. Personal. And do upstream. Git push. Git add. Workshop. Progress. Upstream master. Cool. It's on the repo. You're welcome. Oh, the changes on the config files are also on the repo, just in case. I pushed the changes that we have done so far on the repo. What I would recommend is try to follow the examples on the Haskell, etc. repo. You would see that there's a print report environment variables mismatch. Try to use that feature. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's gonna take a 10-minute break now, and we get back to it.
What did that make file you added to?
Pardon?
That make file you added?
Just to make build, and it puts the binary in the out bin folder. So you don't have to build stack build, copy bins, local bin path. Standardize that. I'm gonna try to grab some water and be back. Do you know I can pick up water?
Water, yes, there's a filter water fountain on this.
Okay. Great. Yes. Thank you. Hey, man. How's it going? Yeah, so I'm back.
Yeah, you were doing that. Cool.
I'm actually showing it right now in the workshop. Etc. It's etc.
For config.
For config. Yeah.
Yes, this looks like it's still jumping to
Yeah, that's the here's what is
I mean, it was this morning. I don't know if it's gone.
Hello. Cool.
Roman, last question. When you run it, how did you run it? I was able to build it your main target. You run it and did you provide this?
Yeah, like if you, let me go to the exercise. If you go and help, specify the password.
to lunch pretty much.
No, like I think we can get started right now, and or well, what time is lunch? At 12?
It's in 20 minutes.
Yeah. I wanted to show something else. Let me check something. I have the schedule here. I just want to make sure I'm not.
That was the one we emailed you.
Do we know if anyone that was here is here right now? Because I would like to get to something before the lunch time.
Until just stepped out, but I think maybe might get something.
Okay. Okay. So he just stepped out for good, I guess.
I think it's probably good.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I think I'm gonna get started again because there's some things that if I wait until later, you're gonna miss other stuff. So I don't want that to happen. It's going back to this. Yes. Okay, so there's this pretty amazing blog post about defining your application layers that specifies how you want to develop your applications using different strategies to run applications, right? So there's always questions around how should I run my program? Should I have everything running on I/O and pass parameters everywhere? Or should I use something like monad transformers and keep my state in a state T or a reader T? Or should I run free monads and interpret everything that I need? The answer is probably you don't want one solution for everything. There's different things that you can do. And you can actually merge those solutions together into different strategies, right? This blog post talks about different layers. There's layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. Layer 1, it's the topmost part of your application needs to run on a reader T monad. And that's a really strong opinion. Reader T, there's many other options. You have state T, for example. The reason why reader T is preferred is because you can have better semantics for concurrent applications if you're using reader T. When you're using the state T and you're having to do threading with that state T context still in place, how is the state going to be modified if you have multiple threads running in it, right? Like how do you accommodate the fact that this thread might modify the state and this thread might modify the state in another way? That problem alone, there's also the other problems around exceptions and threading that make state T, makes it particularly tricky to work with. Reader T, on the other hand, you only have read capabilities, but if you're working on I/O, you can easily have an mutable variable in the environment. So normally what is recommended in the industry is to have a reader T that has an I/O ref or an mvar of some sort in the environment, and you provide ways through interfaces to access that mutable state and do something with it, right? So layer 1 is basically just defining what's the environment of your application. What are all the things that are going to be in your application that you're going to run with? In this particular example, we have a simple application that has the log function and a pool of connections for a database. But you can have other things. You can have the configuration of etc. You can have HTTP server running with an async. Many different things, right? And once you build your app, you just run the application. Simple, right? Layer 2 is defining contracts in that environment. The evolution of Haskell programming in industry has been that you have a stack of monads, and you provide capability on these monads, and you have different layers. In past years, this has been proven to be quite difficult to manage, especially because you can compose those monads in different ways. And you have what they call the, I forgot what it's called, but it's something around the lines of when you add a new type class, a new monad into the stack, you have to make sure that that monad implements all the other type classes from the all other monads. And when you start to add like 4 or 5, you start to see an exponential aspect going on, right? Like you have to make everything instance of everything. So that makes it really hard to maintain software. The guys from FP Complete from experience came with this notion that probably you don't want to have the capabilities in the monadic context. You want to have the capabilities in the environment that the monad context is having, right? So in this particular example, we have a monad reader that has an environment. And this environment has a capability to log functions, meaning there's a function, as soon as the log info is going to make use of whatever this type class does, has log fun, and it's going to be able to use the logging capabilities from log fun. This solution is way cleaner because you don't have to, first of all, make your monad have instances for all the different capabilities out there. And you can scope the capabilities of your environment by the type classes really nicely. So you can have like different aspects for different things, for different parts of your code, right? Is there anything on that explanation that does not make sense in any way or not quite clear?
Do you think there's a value to abstracting things like log func L to a type class right away?
So,
as in, like, if I only have one environment type in my application right now?
So, like, if you have one environment type, that's okay. You can make whatever is your environment, I guess, is a custom record of some sort. That doesn't need to change, right? Like, you just need to contain on that environment a log func record and just make instance of that.
With a concrete single environment type. I'm asking if you think it's valuable to have like a polymorphic API like from the get-go, or is this something that you should add in when you realize you need a second environment?
It depends. Like, you can be as polymorphic as you want. It's okay to start concrete though. Like, if you're implementing functions for yourself, saying that you're using Rio even on the monadic environment instead of M, that's completely acceptable. And if you're using a concrete type on your environment, that's all right as well. If you're trying to reuse things though, if you know you're going to be reusing things, you want to make sure that you're not relying on that app, right? Like, you're not saying, oh, it has to be this app in order to work. As soon as you start to say, oh, I actually need to use this function elsewhere, sure, let's try to make a type class and make that app instance of that type class. This is already there, right? Like, we don't need to do anything for hasfunc to, like, we don't have to define new code to have the constructor hasfunc. You can just do it and that's it. There's nothing stopping you. It's not more effort to do haslogfunc and do app in your implementation, as long as you're not using anything other, any other custom thing that is on your app, right? But yeah, like, a lot of people say, hey, don't start polymorphic until you need it. That's a fine advice. I think if you know what you're doing, sure. But if you don't know what you're doing, just follow the recommended patterns, right? Yeah, like that's 101. Yeah.
So, when you're recommending this way of, instead of proposing monad transformers, you say you want to put the functionality in the environment and then the type class to take whether or not it's in the environment, right?
Yeah.
So, I would think this would work for things that use I/O, but it doesn't seem like it would work for all monad transformers. Like, let's say you have a continuation monad transformer.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, I have one of those in the environment and then just use it.
The question is, and that's a fair assumption, a fair statement. That kind of things that you want to do with a continuation, probably you want to do it on layer 3, because here's the thing: if you are dealing with the fact that things can be completely pure, there's no I/O in the picture, you can put that on a level where you can abstract that away. You can abstract the I/O away. This particular functionality, it's when I/O is required. Yeah. Like, there's no way escaping from that.
So basically a way of breaking up I/O into smaller things.
Exactly. This layer 2 is basically stitching. Here we are building all the different things your program can do. And when you cannot escape I/O, this is where it's supposed to go. If you're doing stuff that does not require I/O in order to be successful, meaning it can be pure and you can run in a pure fashion, then that needs to be layer 3. You can have both and need it.
So it's a bit like having the effects of from Idris or PureScript, you have the effects
I don't want to make comparisons with PureScript or Idris because I'm not that experienced with PureScript and Idris, and whatever I say here will be complete nonsense. Okay. Huh? A link for what? Sure, send it over to Slack. Okay. And layer 3 is quite difficult to explain with just code because in the end, what you want to do is just have pure functions that plug stuff out of the environment and do something, right? And if you have to do some side effect of some sort, you return a record that can be interpreted and executed on layer 2, right? So whenever you have to do a side effect of some sort on your business logic, don't do that as calling the IO right there. Just return a value that can be interpreted and build a interpretation tree with continuations, as you're saying, right? Like having different ways to remove the IO out of your business logic. I know this particular slide is not as helpful as the others. It's quite tricky to come up with different examples of this. Matt, do you have any examples that are good about layer 3 sitting somewhere?
This is where all your business logic should live.
Yeah.
So like layers 1 and 2 are kind of like acquiring the information you need from the ambient environment or your database or the command line or whatever. It doesn't matter. Once you're in layer 3, you have pure values.
Yeah.
And then you do your business logic on your pure values. And you take them back to layer 2 and layer 1 to like actually affect the outside world with those values.
Layer 3 is functional programming.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, layer 1 is imperative programming, layer 2 is object-oriented programming, and layer 3 is functional programming. So they should occupy about as much space in your program as you think based on your opinions of those paradigms.
Yes, that's a great assessment. Cool. Okay, so how are we with time? 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna say one slide. We're gonna have lunch, and then we're gonna do the exercise after lunch. I argue though, there's layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. I argue there's a layer 0 going on there. And layer 0, it's only important if you're dealing with REPL-driven development. Like a lot of people like to work with JCID, just modify the file, change the whole system into whatever the file changes are, and just have that running all the time. Most of times when you're doing it the traditional way where you compile something and run it is, oh, I have to shut down the application because I don't know how to clean up my state. I don't know how to say, I changed this piece of code, the behavior is going to be different. Whatever is running right now, shut it down completely and start over. I argue that's what layer 0 is. And it's really difficult, it's particularly tricky, to get a layer 0 that works in Haskell without a lot of effort. How many times have you seen on your code a void fork IO or a void async or a void whatever that is giving you a resource back and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just going to void it. You know, like, that's layer 0. The way it works is normally, if you want to do something clean, you have this strategy where you say, okay, I'm just going to do with, you know, with all the things. And if you have a strategy like this, you can reload applications, right? Because you know that as soon as the thing reloads and it runs again, all the previous values are completely gone. Why is it important the previous values are gone? What happens if you're bound into a TCP socket and you're having thing running again? You're gonna have like, hey, this port is already bound. What? Like, oh, damn, I have to shut it down, right? Like, you want to make sure that when you're saying, okay, the application is gone, kill everything, right? And with 2 minutes to spare before lunch, I thought about that problem a lot. Like, my background, like I have a not so proud background in Clojure. I worked with Clojure for the past 4 years before starting working full time with Haskell. And one thing that I can say that I envy every day from Clojure, it's the REPL-driven development approach that they use. Because the REPL for Clojure and Lisp is its life. Like everything goes through the REPL. And the feedback loop that they have because of that is insanely fast. I argue Haskell has the same capability. It's just that we don't have a culture of cleaning things up because we normally compile. Like we have both approaches, and we normally go with the compile approach and run it and shut it down, compile again, run it again. Given that, I started working into a library called component M that tries to reduce the burden of modeling your application so that you have to clean up or not, right? Like how I'm going to handle with those, how I'm going to handle those things that are being returned to me that before I did void. This library is going to help us with that. A disclaimer, I have been using this library in anger for the past 2 weeks. I'm not 100% happy with it. It can be improved. Me recommending it here not necessarily mean go and start using it right away, because it's a lot of ideas that still need flushing. But I want to get you thinking into the benefits of having something like this and moving into a solution that makes sense. With that in mind, I think it's lunchtime. So let's go lunch, then go through the code and go with that. Cool.